Hey y'all, today we're going to be talking about if store-bought sourdough starter is worth it. So we have never actually done store-bought sourdough starter before today. This is our first ever one. Our first two sourdough starters were gifted to us by friends, already active, and we just had to maintain them. And then all the other sourdough starters we've had over the years, we've just started from scratch because we were confident enough to after taking care of a couple of starters on our own. So full disclosure, before we get too far into the video, we did not purchase this. It was given to us for a sponsored video, but it was for a sponsored video on TikTok that I've already done. It was over a week ago. So this video is not sponsored in any way by Cultures for Health. This is our own video, but this sourdough starter that I'm using was gifted to us and was not purchased by us. So, but it will still be in completely honest review. Like I said, it's not a sponsored video from Cultures for Health. So this is our starter that we started from scratch. And you can see it's nice and bubbly and active. I fed it earlier today. And we've had this specific sourdough starter we've had since the beginning of the year, but we've been keeping sourdough starters for years. And then this one here is the store-bought one. It's probably a little over a week old at this point. And I also fed this one earlier today, a little earlier than that one. And you can see it's got some bubbles. It does have a nice rise to it. It was only like this high when I fed it, and it rose pretty well. So I think it's time to bake with it for the first time. It does look a little bit weaker than this one, and that's normal because this one is much older than this one. So I'm just going to use my bread recipe from the video that I did a while back. I gave you guys an easy sourdough bread recipe, and in that video we also taught you how to start your own sourdough starter from scratch. So after this video, if you feel that starting a sourdough starter from scratch is the option that you want to take, that would be a great video. And if you do decide that buying a sourdough starter is best for you, there's also a bread recipe in there, and that's the one I'm going to use today. So I'm not going to actually go over the whole recipe in this video and teach you how to make the bread because you probably don't even have a sourdough starter yet if you're watching this video. So I'm going to start by making the bread, and I am not using any of my sourdough starter that we've had for a long time, the one that we started from scratch. I'm not using any of this sourdough starter in the bread today. I'm only using the one that we bought, the Cultures for Health starter. So I'm going to put this one away, and then I'm going to go ahead and get started baking with this one. So really all I've been doing is the package that it came with a little packet of sourdough starter, like dried, that I poured in here and reactivated as per the instructions. And it really wasn't that hard. And the instructions give you day by day what you're supposed to be doing to reactivate it. And then it also gave you maintenance instructions for frequent bakers and then for weekly or monthly bakers, so bakers that aren't baking as often and don't need to feed it every day. Personally, in my opinion, sourdough is not hard to keep, and it's something that everyone should be doing. It really doesn't require a lot of work or attention, just a few minutes a day. And you can make delicious loaves of bread with really good bacteria. All right. And for this bread recipe, I am going to weigh everything out just to make sure everything's nice and accurate. By the way, this sourdough starter smells really good. I also noticed that Cultures for Health sells gluten-free sourdough starters. I didn't even know that you could make gluten-free sourdough. That's interesting. So if you are gluten-free, that might be something worth looking into. All right, and while I'm waiting for my water to just get a little bit warm, I'm going to go ahead and feed the starter again so I can put it away. Anytime you take out of your starter, you need to feed it again. And I am going to be honest, I'm going to do a traditional this is a traditional sourdough recipe. So we're going to make it in a Dutch oven, we're going to score it, all that. And the end result may not look as pretty as you expect, just because normally when I make sourdough bread, I don't do this version. I normally just do a version where I throw it in the stand mixer, let it knead, and then I put it in a loaf pan and let it rise and I bake it. It's like a same day recipe. So you may find that mine doesn't look as pretty just due to the fact that I'm not as good at scoring, and I don't have as much experience in like scoring and baking in a Dutch oven as most people do. All right, the consistency is right back about where I want it to be. Now, one thing I did do is the instructions that they gave made the sourdough starter a little bit runnier than what I was used to. So I did wind up adjusting how much water and flour I was giving it every day. But honestly, I don't think that this is necessary. I think it still would have worked out without doing that. It wasn't like overly runny. It was just more runny than I was used to. And with my sourdough, I almost don't even need to measure out how much flour and water anymore. I just know by the consistency that it's had enough flour and water. So for me, I had to get it to the perfect texture. So now that this is fed, we're gonna go put it back and we'll feed it again in 12 to 24 hours, or we'll make more bread with it. All right, y'all, I got the water finally to the right temperature. I had overheated it, so I had to add some ice. Really, you just want lukewarm bath water when making sourdough. The warmness helps give it that kick to get started, but you don't want it too hot that it kills the bacteria either. Like I said, I'm just measuring everything out by weight, making sure we have the right amount here. As you can see, I'm already making a mess. If you bake with me, I'm gonna make a mess. And we're just gonna mix that in, get it. So pretty much you just have cloudy water at this point. I'm gonna add some oil. And the great thing about sourdough is, unlike other bread where you need like 10 different ingredients, sourdough you need like 4 ingredients, 5 ingredients, and you need no other leavening agent besides your sourdough starter, which I think is awesome. Now it's time to measure out the flour. I'm probably gonna have to do this in multiple batches here because we're gonna need a good amount. By the way, we do grind our own flour, so this does change how the bread comes out sometimes, slightly. But the recipe that I gave should work with just like all-purpose flour or whatever you normally use to feed your starter. And we use Redmond salt for everything: canning, cheese making, bread making, cooking, just seasoning in general. I'll leave that link down below. So now we're just going to stir this in, and you'll probably end up with a drier, shaggier dough. Alright, so this is a nice little drier dough here. I switched to my hands. Once I start getting it all mixed in, it's just easier. I'm going to do my stretches and folds and bulk fermentation overnight. So we'll pick this back up in the morning. One more thing before I leave you all for the night. This is a loaf of bread that I just made from our starter that we made from scratch. So I started this morning and it's done tonight. This is what I was saying about how I usually do a same-day recipe. So literally I put the ingredients in my stand mixer, let it knead it for me, shaped it, put it in a loaf pan, and then baked it. And as you can see, this is what I was talking about my scoring job. It's fine. It doesn't look bad. It's just that you wouldn't expect this from a normal sourdough. I tried to score this one. Normally I don't, but I tried it, and you can see didn't really leave that deep of marks. So I'm about to do my first set of stretch and folds on the dough here. Looking nice. And I'm going to do that a couple times, and then we'll do bulk fermentation, and then I will check back in with y'all in the morning. All right, it's very early in the next morning. You can see the dough has risen a decent amount by now. So now I'm just going to shape it and get it in a Dutch oven and let it just get puffy a little bit more. It'll probably only take like 30 minutes to an hour. Then I'll score it, stick it in the oven, and we'll see what kind of bread we get. By the way, just a real quick tip here is a lot of people use cornmeal in the bottom of their Dutch oven to stop it from sticking. Personally, I just find that parchment paper is way easier, way less hassle, and there's literally no way that your bread can stick if you use parchment paper. So I've always used parchment paper, never had a problem. I know some other sourdough bakers that have used parchment paper and they love it too. So definitely recommend parchment paper over cornmeal. All right, here's the bread all done. It's so beautiful. Again, ignore the scoring job. It has nothing to do with the sourdough and everything to do with that. I just can't score bread properly. Somehow this part worked out perfectly, but then when I tried to do these, it didn't do anything. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong with that. I'm gonna have to do more practice scoring. So I'm gonna cut into this for you so y'all can see it. See if I can do this with one hand. There we go. It's so beautiful. All right, it smells so good. I wanna try some. Wow. That's amazing. It's perfect. I love sourdough, and I've never had a loaf that I made or someone else made that I've tried that I haven't liked. So I love all sourdough. I think that's delicious. So I'm gonna quickly rate sourdough starting methods. So I'm gonna do gifted sourdoughs, which means the ones that you get from your friends or your neighbors. Like they'll give you some and then they'll teach you how to maintain it and everything. I'll rate bought sourdough starters and from scratch sourdough starters. So obviously I think gifted is the best because you get an active sourdough starter from a friend or neighbor who can also teach you hands-on and answer any questions that you'll have. So they can teach you hands-on how to take care of the starter, how to maintain it, how to make bread with it, and then they're also probably available for any questions you would have in the future. I think I'm going to say that bought starters are number 2. It was really, really easy to start. Like, I don't know how you could mess it up. It had instructions and everything. But you do need to spend some money. And if you do have questions about the instructions, it wouldn't be that easy to just contact the company that you bought the sourdough from, right? And then lastly, sourdough from scratch. I'm gonna rate this as last. Not that it's bad, and I do it all the time. It's just that starting it from scratch, there can be things that can go wrong. And if you don't have someone else who does sourdough, you don't really have anyone to talk to. Now, if you wanna attempt making from scratch, and you have someone who does work with sourdough, that's great. But for those of you that can't get a gifted starter, I think that bought sourdough is definitely the second best option for you. It really even isn't that expensive. I think that one was like $13, I want to say. And I just want to mention too that a bought sourdough starter, a from scratch sourdough starter, a gifted sourdough starter, they're all going to last you a lifetime. As long as you keep them maintained and take care of them, they will last you for as long as you do that. And even if you want to go away on vacation or whatever, you can freeze it, you can dehydrate it, and then revive it when you get home. So definitely love this sourdough starter. I will link the San Francisco sourdough starter and the gluten-free one just because I think the gluten-free one, that's really interesting, and I think that it could appeal to some people who didn't even know that they could get into sourdough. Because if you're gluten-free, I didn't even know that gluten-free people could get into making sourdough. So I think that's interesting. So I'll link both of those. Plus, I will link the video on how to make a starter from scratch and a foolproof bread recipe, which is how I made this bread. Really good. Highly recommend making it this way. And then if you all want the same day easy sandwich bread recipe, I can do a video on that too. Just let me know in the comments. But thanks for watching. Make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you have any questions at all about sourdough, about the bought starters, if you have any thoughts or things that maybe I missed, please drop them in the comments below. We love to hear from you guys, and we'll see y'all soon.